Hey everybody, happy American Craft Beer Week. This is I'm Derek Hass. This is Happy Hour with Derek. I am here with the very legendary Andrew Finley. So Andrew Finley works with us at Columbia Distributing. He is the why don't you introduce yourself, Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Finley. I'm the specialty district manager for the on-premise here in Portland. So I cover bottle shops, high-end restaurants, high-end beer bars, and specialty retail down here in Portland.
Awesome. So Andrew is the guy that I call when I have a beer question. This guy is getting ready to take the advanced Cicerone course,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you're really excited about that.
Super stoked.
Yeah, super stoked. So that is basically the Cicerone program. There's 4 levels to it. There's the beer server version, the certified Cicerone version, which Andrew and I both are, the advanced Cicerone, which Andrew is going to do, which he's crazy to even attempt it. But like I said, he's very, very knowledgeable in that. And then beyond that is the Master Cicerone.
Master Cicerone.
Not a lot of those out there, but we're really excited for Andrew to get going and take that opportunity. So, my partner and I are here celebrating American Craft Beer Week, and as we announced on Tuesday, we kind of submitted some hope to get some questions submitted from viewers like you, and we did get some, and we're hoping some more pour in today. But beyond that, we are just sitting here at Portland Brewing down in Northwest Portland, drinking beer. It's Happy Hour with Derek, so that means tomorrow's Friday. We're all very excited about that. I'll drink to tomorrow being Friday. So beyond that, have any questions come in yet?
Not yet, but let's start with a few questions that we got in this week.
Okay.
So one of them that we got from Chris W.
Okay.
He said that he's thinking about brewing some ciders. What tips do you guys have for putting hops in ciders?
Oh wow, hop ciders. Well, Chris W, not my favorite way to drink ciders with hops, but really the best way to add hops or bitterness to a cider is going to be in the dry hop form. So you're gonna want to make sure it's aged correctly, and then essentially add kind of a tea bag full of hops and let the hops kind of pass the flavors onto the cider to get a little bit more bitterness from your to the finished product. So not a lot of cideries out there doing it, but it's definitely something that people are playing around with. Not nearly as much as the hoppy beers, but good luck out there, Chris.
Yeah, I'm a terrible homebrewer, and I've never actually made cider, which is why I do this job, I suppose. Right? There's a huge misconception about hop ciders being bitter. You're not going to get any real true bitterness out of the hops in a hop cider because you're only using that dry hop method, right? That only imparts aroma. If you were going through an extensive boil process with your cider and you had hops in that boil, that's where you'd encounter a lot of that bitterness. So in a lot of ways, I think I'm a bigger fan of hop ciders maybe than Derek in the grand scheme of
Sounds like
things,
it.
despite the fact that I cannot make them to save myself. But where that aroma is going to come from is essentially that dry hop process that he just described. So it's going to be during fermentation. You can experiment with different varietals. You're going to get a different batch of aromas based on what varietals of hops you're using. But it's actually probably a simpler process than adding hops in a boil during homebrewing for beer.
Yeah, much less risk doing it that late. It's not going to affect the finished product quite as dramatically if you do it in the boil.
All right, so this is actually really interesting. We have one live question, and we got a question earlier this week from Melanie H. And they are both about IBUs. She says, I hear people say IBUs when talking about beer, and she wants to know what IBUs stands for.
Yeah, Melanie, that's a real common question, right? You're going to see a lot more of the IBU abbreviation being used in beer bars and restaurant menus around town. IBU, International Bittering Unit, right? So it's essentially a measurement that we use to kind of roughly approximate how bitter a beer is going to be. Generally, it's a scale from 0 to 100. There are some beers that exceed that 100 level IBU situation. But Derek's probably had a couple of those and not like any of them.
It's hard to rip the enamel off your teeth.
Yeah.
They get pretty bitter.
I had 1,000 IBU beer once, and it was interesting. I'll put it that way.
It's not a thing.
So it's essentially a measurement of how much hops you have in a beer, right? So it's not necessarily specifically correlated with bitterness, but you're going to know that something that's 80 IBUs, for example, is going to be significantly hoppier and more bitter than something that's, say, like 20 IBUs.
Yeah, I agree. Another way to think about that is I might perceive bitterness a little bit different than Andrew. So if there's a beer that's got a higher IBU that's going to be a little bit more dry hopped, it might be more bitter to Andrew than me. I mean, Mr. 1,000 IBU guy over here. So it also matters, with what the malt bill of the beer is as well. So if the beer is big enough to hold up to a lot of those hops, it might not be quite as bitter as it actually says it is from the measurement. So,
yeah, that's a great point. Like IBUs in an isolated situation, not countering the sweetness of the malt, that'd probably be a much more accurate description of how bitter it is. But IBUs don't take into factor how sweet the wort is or how sweet, let's say, the base beer is before you've hopped it, which has a huge impact on perceived bitterness in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. Melanie, hopefully that answers your question.
Jeff E says you rock, Derek.
Oh, thank you, Jeff E.
Okay.
My fan base is really growing. Thanks, Jeff E.
We have a live question from Jennifer F. She asks, what's the difference between an IPA and a pale ale?
Oh, jeez. You or me?
Derek doesn't want to field this question, apparently. No, it's complicated, right? Like, I mean, essentially an IPA is a much more assertive pale ale, right? So IPA stands for India Pale Ale. There's historical reasons as to why that's the case, but India Pale Ales are considerably hoppier and generally higher in alcohol as well than pale ales, right? So a simple way of thinking of this is pale ales tend to be a lot more balanced with regard to bitterness and a little bit more mild in terms of alcohol. IPAs tend to be a lot more assertive with regard to flavor profile, alcohol, bitterness, all those things.
Yeah, and obviously, these questions are all going to be pretty vague, and it's really hard to sit here and actually explain the definition, because there's a ton of history, to Andrew's point, behind where the IPA came from and where the English Pale came from, to be the pale ale that we know today. But everybody's got their own variation of every style. So, we're here at Portland Brewing. Their pale ale might be a little different than if we were down in Petaluma, California with Lagunitas as pale ale, which is a much hoppier version. So it also kind of brings into what the brewer's perspective or interpretation of that style is. But yeah, Andrew explained it perfectly. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and if you want to try something out, I mean, you totally nailed it on the head. Like, grab a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and grab a Lagunitas IPA. I mean, those are two classic California iterations of either style that have been around for decades. And I think back to back, you'll kind of understand sort of the difference in intensity that we're talking about. It's not great necessarily, but it's noticeable.
Cool. And then along the same lines, Ben asked, earlier this week, he asked, what's the difference between a porter and a stout?
Oh, Ben.
Thanks, Ben. All right, see you next week.
Ben, great question. Another pair of styles there you could compare in a lot of different ways. They both have total different history, but most brewers would agree that the porter has malted. The difference would be the malted barley versus a stout with the unmalted roasted barley. So it's really just kind of an ingredients difference. But again, depending on the brewer's interpretation of that, the IBUs are going to be a little bit different, which we learned earlier is international bitterness units. So one could be a little bit hoppier than the other, but most brewers are going to agree it's going to be unmalted versus malted unmalted roasted barley versus malted barley.
I think that's the perfect answer to this question to a certain extent, because there is no perfect answer to this question, right? Like,
he said I got it wrong, is what he just said.
No, I mean, not necessarily. Yes, totally. I think this is a historical question more than anything else, right? I mean, we can talk about current iterations of either style and generally accepted practice with regard to ingredients you find in both of them. But the crazy thing is, if you look at, let's say, the Oxford Companion of Beer, which is a huge tome about all things beer, kind of edited by Garrett Oliver from Brooklyn Brewery.
It's an amazing book.
It's an insane book.
It's the ultimate encyclopedia for beer.
Most entries are maybe, half a page. They're fairly short, right? You can sum up most things regarding beer in a couple paragraphs, right? The entry on porter is 3 entire pages. It's insane. And that's partially because there's a lot of misconceptions about the origin of porter, where it came from. Of course, it's a traditional English beer that has a lot of history in London, say about like 300 years ago. I think the most important thing to remember is that all stouts are essentially stronger iterations of porter. I mean, at least initially that's where it came from, right? Not too dissimilar from this IPA pale ale designation that we were just talking about. It's weird. I think you could survey 100 brewers about porter and stout and get 105 different answers about what's actually happening here. I think it's one of the most interesting historical aspects about beer, particularly English beer. But if you want to know more, I would recommend reading more about porter first, because there's more information about the history of porter, and porter actually preceding what we come to know of as stouts now. But Ben, that's a super complicated question.
It's a trick question, Ben.
It is a trick question.
Trick question, Ben.
I see what you're doing there, Ben.
Yeah. What do you do, Ben? We'll ask you some questions.
See you at the advanced Cicerones test, Ben.
Awesome. Well, I mean, that's all the questions I have. If any, we'll give a opportunity for any other live questions to come in. We'll give it a couple minutes, and
I'm running out of beer, so hopefully questions will come soon.
Yeah, are we allowed to go on beer runs during the questioning process? Is that allowed?
Oh, here we go. So Christina B, she asked, what is the weirdest / strangest flavor of beer you have ever drank?
Oh, man. Well, Christina B, where do you start? I like spice. I like spicy food, so I can't say that, you know, brewers that add chipotle or hot peppers to their beer, I can't say that that's an odd flavor. But I think that there's a lot of people that don't like spice that think that. I have to give it to my friends at Rogue, who made a beer with yeast from their head brewer's beard. I think that's kind of tops the chart in my opinion. I think our very candid reaction from our camera person that just almost dry heaved back there. I think that's what's going to take the cake for me. It's a beer that I refuse to drink because, I mean, I don't think I'd drink a beer with yeast from my own beard, let alone
I don't know.
a stranger's
Okay,
beard.
yeast it definitely makes the list, right? I mean, everybody has an adverse reaction to the notion of yeast cultivated by somebody's beard. But yeast is naturally occurring. Yeast is on everything. I mean, like they make wines, for example, that are essentially fermented with yeast that were naturally occurring on the skins of the grapes outside. I mean, out of somebody's beard, there's probably yeast in your beard, dude. You don't hang out in breweries
I'm sure
all that
there
often.
is. Sure there is.
I'm not going to drink the beer we make with that, but
Yeah.
there was a cider from the good Reverend Nat here in Portland that was once fermented using leg of lamb that was essentially submerged in there. It was called Angel of Death. It was spectacular.
Oh, Nat West.
There were a lot of people that also refused to drink that, just given the way it was.
Did you try it?
I did. I thought it was great. I really did. I'm also the kind of person that would think that's great, though, so
Yeah.
I'll say grain of salt.
Yeah.
Breweries that I think are known for pretty outlandish ingredients, because I can't necessarily pinpoint just one or another that I've had, but I would say Dogfish Head for sure with regard to really interesting ingredients.
Oh, yeah.
Brewdog in Scotland and now out of Ohio in the United States does some extremely outlandish stuff with regard to beer ingredients. I think Rogue makes the list absolutely, even beyond the beer situation.
Yeah. Well, they did that Purple Sea Star with the...
Yes, yeah. There was that to raise money to save starfish in
that
the
was
Oregon
neat,
coast. Their Voodoo Donut series of beers has had some extremely unusual ingredients for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're only going to see stranger and stranger things, to be completely honest, Christina. I mean, I think we're only at the tip of the iceberg with regard to weird ingredients.
Well, you can also think about it, you know, a couple years ago. Nowadays, we're so used to seeing grapefruit and citrus and so much of this fruit that's already being added to beers currently that it's normal to us right now. So
yeah,
hopefully beard yeast doesn't become normal, but you know,
we'll find out when they make beard yeast sculpin. That'll be the time that we finally figure it's.
Yeah, Ballast Point and their innovation. Well, cool. Well, any other questions?
We do. Speaking of citrusy beer, Megan H asked, "What's your guys' favorite summery beer?" Summer's approaching.
Summery beer. I have to give a shout out to Deschutes Twilight. Rest in peace. That was always my favorite summer beer. It's not rest in peace for good. It'll be back in some way or another. But
we hope.
Yeah, I would say my current favorite summer beer has got to be Fremont Summer. I think it's a brewery out of Seattle, Washington. They're making awesome beers, but their summer ale it's perfect. It's sweet. It's a little bit bitter. It's nice. It's refreshing. You can have multiples. I'm not saying I drink a lot, but I can drink a lot of those. It's just the perfect balance. It reminds me of summer, and it always will. So I guess that's not fair because today's the first nice sunny day. So I'm hoping to go home and drink some of those. But that's my personal current, I should say, favorite seasonal.
Derek just pulled a classic Cicerone thing, which was telling you about a beer you can't get, but it's one that he loves entirely. Gosh, favorite summer beer. I'm a huge fan of Bavarian Hefeweizen, so I tend to drink a lot of like Paulaner Hefeweizen and Hackershore Hefe about this time of year, I think. But gosh, maybe this isn't wearing the shirt today, but
shameless plug.
Unibrew Blanche de Chambly Vit beer,
beer.
I think, is a spectacular
Great
summer
beer.
beer, and they do fruited versions. We just got the elderberry. It'll be the Ephemer elderberry, which is sort of a fruited version of the Blanche de Chambly. But I tend to go for the import styles, either Germans or Belgians, I think, this time of year. As much as I love Fremont summer, and I was recently drinking more than I will tell you in Seattle a recent weekend ago. But yeah, there's too many good options this time of year.
Yeah.
Cool. We did get one more question.
Oh my gosh, they're pouring in.
Yeah, let's make this one of our last ones. Danny O asks, is there any beer you prefer warm/room temperature versus cold?
That is a great question, Danny. I'm going to cut off Derek before he even tries to answer.
Oh. Go ahead, Andrew.
Deschutes Twilight. No, I'm kidding. Cask ale, quite honestly. So there's a couple of cask engines around here in Portland, definitely. Those are beers that are typically enjoyed at cellar temperature, so something maybe closer to 50 or 55 degrees. They've got lower levels of dissolved CO2, so they're going to be less carbonated on the palate. And that tends to lend itself to warmer temperatures, right? You're going to get a little bit more esters off of it in the nose. I wouldn't say that I would want to drink a Rainier at cellar temperature. I tend to prefer those. We've all done it, of course,
Yeah,
maybe in parking lots at some point. But yeah, I would say cask ale is definitely better enjoyed at warmer temperatures for sure.
So what Andrew's saying is more of like a generic style that's going to be better that way. I mean, a lot of our ancestors didn't have the beauty of refrigeration that we're used to these days. But that doesn't mean that some of those bigger, more rich, more maltier beers, it doesn't mean you don't want to drink them at 38 degrees, which is what a lot of the draft beer is served at. But let a beer warm up. If it's big, if it's a big, malty, nice, really awesome beer, let it warm up. See the differences. Obviously, you don't want to let it warm up, then get cold, then warm up, then get cold. But if you drink it, pull it out of the fridge, and it's too cold, pour that into a glass and let it warm up, and let those flavors really, really shine through. The beer really changes. And to Andrew's point, Rainier's probably not going to change very much because it's perfected on such a huge scale.
It's fine.
But some of these larger 22 large format bottles that you can get at some of the local retailers, let them warm up and don't serve them too cold, because chances are a lot more flavors are going to show through as you let it warm up and breathe a little bit. Very similar to wine in that sense. So, well, shoot. I'm ready to start my weekend and wrap this episode up of Happy Hour with Derek. Obviously, we all still have another day at work left, but it just feels like the weekend because the sun's out. So thank you, Andrew, so much.
Yeah,
as you can tell, this is who I call when I have a beer question because he's that good. I guarantee he doesn't know this yet, but you will see him again on another Happy Hour with Derek episode. But happy American Craft Beer Week, and we'll see you next Thursday at 4 p.m. So cheers. Salud.